Hi. Now the video today was just kind of a response actually to a lot of emails I've been getting from people in regards to, you know, tips for moving to the country and stuff like that. I've actually been getting a lot of emails from people saying that they're thinking of moving to the country, or they want to move, you know, out to regional areas and what have you, but they're not really sure of, you know, any advice, I guess, they're kind of asking for as far as what to do, what not to do and stuff like that. Now, like, for me to actually go over everything that you kind of need to look out for and take into account and stuff like that would be 1,000 videos, honestly. So I kind of thought I'll just do a quick video, or just do one video, and just kind of, you know, go over the greatest tips as far as, you know, moving to the country and stuff like that. I guess the first thing, there's a few major points. The first one is why. Why are you moving to the country? Like, you know, do you really want to move? Like, you know, the kind of ideal of, you know, living in the country and, you know, it's nice and all that kind of stuff is great, but, you know, really make sure that it's what you want, okay? So don't forget you're leaving a lot of things behind. Like, depending on how far away you're moving from the built up areas, don't forget what you're going to leave, alright? So, like, for me, for example, I can't, after 7:30, I can't go and get anything, basically, without having to drive for about 25 k's. So it's a 50k round trip. Alright, so take things like that into account. You know, you can't just whip down the street and, you know, at 11:30 at night and get milk or whatever. Okay, so the convenience factor is gone when you move to the country for a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of good aspects, but there's kind of things like that that people forget about, you know, like staying in, pick an area. If you like a certain area or region, it's a good idea to spend some time in that region too, like Monday to Friday and weekends, alright? So maybe stay at a B&B for a few weekends, maybe if you can afford it and what have you, spend a couple of weeks someplace. And now you might think, oh, you know, couple of weeks. If that seems a bit daunting to you, like being there for a few weeks, then maybe you should think about if you really want to live there or not. You know, it's like when you work overseas, you know, you go somewhere on a holiday and it's great fun and you're having, you know, a good time and you think, oh cool, this is really cool, but when you move there and you're living there, it's a bit of a different story. It's still fun, but it's different. Okay, so take that into account. And it's a good idea to stay in places during that period, not just holidays and stuff when everything's open and it's vibrant and there's people everywhere and it's fun and it's sunny and that. Try and stay there at all different times, right? Because usually, like where I am, for example, compared to Melbourne, summer's always a couple of degrees hotter and winter's always a couple of degrees colder. Sometimes the water freezes in the pipes in winter. In summer, it's just so hot, no amount of cooling could probably cool your house down, you know what I mean? So take things like that into consideration, alright? The other thing I was going to talk about is when you want to plan to move. Like, if you work in the city, like, what are you going to do, you know, for work? I do jump feet in first sometimes, but it's a good idea to hedge your bets too, you know, so you might, if there's a couple of you, one of you might want to keep working in the city and another person, if you find a place that you like, you know, and then do you want to commute back and forth? Are you going to try and plan to work in that area, the country area? If so, is there work there? Do your research on the websites, the employment websites, and see what's actually going around. Talk to people around there, try and suss out the local economy, things like that, okay? If you're going to commute, don't forget, if you're commuting, that's a lot of time back and forth. It's a lot of mileage in your car. It's a lot of petrol or LPG gas to go through or what have you. So take all that into account, alright? So make sure you're really aware of what you're going to be in for, okay, for stuff like that. Also, the property itself, like, how much land do you want? You know, like, do you want just an acre? Or do you want 5 or 2 or 20? Take that into account too. And if you want to have a lot, the more land you get, the more responsibility you've got too, alright? So as far as, like, let's say you live in the suburbs and you've got just a normal block, right? You've probably got like some secateurs and a hedge clipper maybe and a lawnmower. So if you move in the country, chances are, I can guarantee you're gonna, if you've got a big property, you'll need a ride-on lawnmower. That's a few grand. You'll need a good chainsaw. You'll need different bits and pieces. You need all your tools. Like I'm really talking the basics, like hammer, saw, secateurs, clippers, bolt cutters, the whole 9 yards. Like some people have all that stuff already, but some people don't. Alright, there's nothing worse than you need tools and things like that. So take that into consideration, as well as your car. Alright, so if you've got this little runabout that's great in the city, it might not be applicable in the country. You might need a utility or like a pickup or you know, something else. You know, like if you're going to have livestock, are you going to have to fence off areas where, if like livestock, let me stick to livestock for a sec. If you're going to have chickens, that's one thing. You can generally look after them pretty easily with chickens. You give them a nice patch, you know, and they're fine. Feed them, take into account, you know, obviously they're going to have somewhere positioned nice, so they've got a bit of shade, bit of sun, water, food, you know, all that kind of stuff. You've really got to take responsibility for your animals, you know, especially if you get sheep or cows. Like, what if one gets sick? You know what I mean? You're going to have to call the vet or this or that. And what if you get pests and rabbits and foxes and, you know, all this kind of stuff? And do you need to fence off areas? You know, is there adequate water supply? Are you going to be able to afford to feed them during winter when, you know, the grass isn't growing and stuff like that? So take all that stuff into consideration and do your research on the house and the area, especially on the house. Alright, so make sure, I know it's a bit hypocritical for me to say, if you find somewhere, don't just buy it, because like I did, I learnt the hard way. So try not to do that, alright? But if you find a place, talk to the neighbours, you know, have a look around, drive around the area during the day, drive around the area at night and see what it's like as well. Check the house out, get a building inspection and get a pest inspection. Alright, if there's two things you'll need to do when you're buying a home, I can't stress how much you need to do this. It might be a couple of $100 for each one, but it's money well worth spent. Alright, so get a building inspection and get a pest inspection. Alright, I can't stress it more. Alright, get those two things, especially on an old house. You have an old house, you usually have old problems. Alright, so make sure you do all that kind of stuff and just take into account what actually needs to be done to the house. Do you have to do excavation work, renovations? What's the plumbing like? What's the electrical work like? Is there sufficient like shops in the area? How far are you going to have to go to and fro to, you know, get this and that? Your friends and your family, you know, they're going to be suddenly, you know, however far away, say 100 k's away, you know, they can't just pop in after work for a beer or something like that, or come around and watch the cricket. So, you know, take all that into consideration. You probably find that you've limited to having guests in the house to weekends, because no one's going to come up Monday to Friday for dinner and then drive home again, like do 200 and something k's just to have tea. So take that into account too, especially if you're living by yourself. If you're living by yourself, you're by yourself Monday to Friday, alright? There's no one else, just you. So buy a dog. You know, or if there's a couple of you, you know, you're going to be able to make sure it's a decision that you want to do. If you've got your husband, wife, kids, pets, whatever, make sure that everyone is, you know, into it. Spend some time in the area. Do your research on the area and the house. And make sure you're going to be alright financially. Alright? And they're the main things, I think. Any questions, just give me a yell, alright? So, I've tried to, like I said, I could do 100 videos on what to do and what not to do. I love living in the country, it's the best thing I ever did. But, moving up here that is, but just a lot of people emailing me saying, you know, any tips or advice, if they're thinking of doing this and that and yada yada. Just do your research, take your time. When you find a nice place, make sure it's all fine. Financially you're okay, you're ready to go. There's always going to be ups and downs. You can't be prepared for everything, alright? But you can kind of be as prepared as you can. You don't want to go in for blindfold on. Cool. But any questions in particular, just give me a yell, alright? Cool. I hope I answered some questions. Alright, see ya.